Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Two Rivers Tuesday. I'm your host here with John Teague. How are you, John?
I'm doing pretty well, Maggie. And yourself?
Pretty good, other than the rainy. We have another spitty mist day.
Ooh, spitty mist.
Not my favorite.
How are your Christmas preparations going?
Good. Most things are wrapped. Most things are bought for. I think we're like 80%.
80% there? Well, that's good because we were just talking before we started recording that next week, like a week from today as we record this, is Christmas Eve.
It is.
I'm like, holy cow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that happened fast.
It really did.
In fact, we may have talked about this, but we lost some crazy amount of days this year because of the way like Thanksgiving fell and all that. I think it had something with that darn leap year.
That darn leap year. Is this year a leap year?
Let's get rid of leap year. 2024 was a leap year, yeah.
Okay, who knew?
Let's get rid of leap year and the clock changing stuff.
I agree wholeheartedly. We don't need either of those things.
Let's do that. Let's start a campaign.
What else would you get rid of?
There's lots of campaigns. What else would I get rid of?
Yes.
I would get rid of the insurance company, the car insurance companies that have the thing that tracks how you drive.
Oh.
That's right on the nose because I was thinking about that on the way in this morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got big insurance watching over me now. Big Brother is watching us because we're trying to get a discount on our insurance. And so it's tracking everything we do. And I'll be honest, I don't like it.
Yeah. I feel like Jake hasn't signed our family up for that because he knows it would not work in our favor.
It would not work in our favor. Well, let's just say there are some extenuating circumstances for our family that are basically putting us in a corner and we have to try this in order to get a discount.
I see. I would get rid of four-way stops. I love roundabouts.
But okay, I was thinking about this on the way in too. Like, what's the rule on the roundabout? Is it like, should everybody be going slow enough that you should be able to work your way in?
Oh.
I feel like at the roundabout over by the interstate here in Ottawa, like, people hit that thing like coming from the north and from the south. So from Mountain View and then from north up Ottawa,
they fly through it.
Georgetown, like they hit that thing like they barely hit the brakes, you know?
I thought that's how it was supposed to work.
You're
supposed to just
it's
go
great.
through.
Yeah, it's great unless you're coming in from the side.
Yes.
And then you're just sitting there and you're like, this feels like I'm actually stopped right now.
Yes.
This feels like a two-way stop. Yes.
I do not like the multi-lane roundabouts.
Oh.
Those are confusing.
Yeah, and they're just an accident waiting to happen.
That one over by the dam, under the dam. Are you with me?
Oh yeah, Access Road.
Yeah, if you're going down there, that one is very confusing.
Yeah, but the one that's even worse is the one over there behind the mall. Where Abuelo, is it Abuelo's?
That one's so bad.
That one over there, behind Trader Joe's. Katie got sideswiped there. Yeah.
Really?
Because that's like a two-lane roundabout that has the space of one lane.
Yes, it's so tiny, and there's just a lot going on there.
Yeah.
All right, we digress.
Yes.
All right, on Sunday you talked about musicals in your sermon. What is your all-time favorite musical?
My all-time favorite musical is Wicked.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah, and I sang a line from that song, from that musical.
You did?
And I love it. Yeah. I mean, it's great. And anybody that goes and sees the movie, and I thought the movie was very well done, but it doesn't hold a candle to seeing it on Broadway.
Really?
Yeah. Okay,
here's a question I have about musicals. Is there only one set of people that can do that play? Is there only one set of actors that can perform that play, or does that play get performed everywhere?
So there is a Broadway cast, and there's usually what's called an original cast.
Okay.
So think about Hamilton, which would be up there with maybe a close second place for me as far as favorite musicals. Like Lin-Manuel Miranda and Leslie Odom Jr. Those were Leslie Odom Jr. was Aaron Burr, and then Lin-Manuel Miranda was Hamilton. They were the original cast. Okay, but they're not going to be those characters forever. They'll hand that off to somebody else, and then there's a whole nother cast that is doing that and continuing to perform that on Broadway. And then there's also a touring cast in there, people who are touring around the country, probably around the world, and they're performing it as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I've never seen a play on Broadway.
You haven't?
No.
Oh man, it's powerful.
I should try it.
And you're in awe of just their talent.
Yes. That's how I felt in the movie.
Yeah.
Was just in awe of their talent. I've never even been to New York.
You haven't?
No.
You've never been to New York?
Never.
Oh my gosh.
No.
You guys need to go. Do you have a big anniversary coming up?
We do, a 10-year anniversary, but I don't like big cities. So I feel nervous that I won't like it.
Well, it is a big city and there's a lot going on, but it is kind of fun to see just some of the things that you always see on shows and movies and things like that.
I feel like it would be a cool experience.
It would be a cool experience.
The 10-year anniversary, I feel like that's a risk.
Yeah, well, it's not for everybody.
Yeah. All right. You talked about musicals because...
Why did I talk about music? Oh, because music stirs us. Because I get very stirred by certain songs, and there are certain things that, for better or worse, right? I mean, like we can all think of like those songs that like those are our like screamo songs, like when we're angry and we put this on, and it just like that like inner rager inside of us, like anger, or as my youngest daughter would say, that hot chili pepper inside of our brains, like is like just feeding off that rage, But there are also songs that like stir something deeply within us, right? Like and hopefully in the most spiritual sense, there are songs that stir our hearts and our affections for Jesus and what he's done for us. But there's something about music, and this is like we've already gone way too long on this, but I watched a whole video. I did a deep dive on YouTube on sort of how the songs in Wicked were composed, and there's a perfect fifth, like an interval of a fifth, like the 1 and the 5. That is all throughout the music of Wicked, and it's like a power thing. Like it there's something in your ear that when you hear that perfect fifth, it just resonates within you. And
interesting.
And the video went on to show where like a lot of John Williams, who is a famous composer of the scores for Indiana Jones, for Star Wars. I think he did E.T.
Wow.
And there's probably others that I'm forgetting right now. But a lot of perfect fifths in those songs, and that's what makes them epic.
Yeah.
We digress.
That's very interesting.
Anyway.
Okay, so in Isaiah though, there's these
Bible. Yes.
There's these servant songs, and you were kind of making the parallel that in the same way that a lot of times these powerful songs will like stir something in us. We can look at these servant songs in Isaiah, and they stir something in us also. They stir our affection for Jesus, and in a lot of these songs we see how different he is than like the world or even like what we would expect, and that kind of stirs us like revolt almost in us of like this king is different, and there's revolutionary. Revolutionary. There's something so powerful about that. So the first one we looked at was justice, and one of the lines that you said is, do you have eyes to see the injustice around you? And so looking at the way that this king brings justice, and he brings things back to their original design. You kind of unpack that word for us, that he makes things how they should be, and he's using us to make things how they should be as well. So that reminded me of our dangerous prayer back at the beginning of the year. Yeah. It was almost a year ago. Wow. Those have stuck with a lot of us. But the one about break my heart, it reminded me of that, of just like, do we have eyes to see it? And then when we see it, what do we do with it? Yeah.
What do we do with it? Yeah. I think often, we have two problems. Probably we can get so busy that we don't even see, it's almost like our brain sort of filters it out, because perhaps we've somehow trained our brain to sort of filter out that information, because what's more important is whatever is on our agenda, whatever is the top of our mind. And we may be so busy that we don't see what's going on around us and see the things that aren't the way they're supposed to be. It reminds me of The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, that book by John Mark Comer. And he talked about the speed of love and how it's slow, and hurry is the enemy of love, because it's hard to love well when we're in a hurry. It's hard to see things that are unjust when we're in a hurry and we're, just preoccupied with our own stuff. So the first thing we got to do is pray and ask the Lord who has eyes of compassion, who sees people like sheep without a shepherd, who knows what is not the way it's supposed to be. And we need to have eyes to see like he sees. And the next part is be willing to step in and do something about it. And sometimes that is, I think we often think of like big grand gestures, like I need to start a nonprofit and free people from human trafficking. And you might need to do that.
Yeah.
That might be exactly what the Lord has called you to because of what he's put on your heart and because of the experiences you've had and circumstances in your life or whatever you may be exposed to. That may be exactly what you need to do. It may also just be that you see someone who is passed by or overlooked, and you step over there and you help them get through that doorway. You help them with their groceries that they're struggling with, that you share an encouraging word with someone who looks really defeated. And that's a part of bringing justice into the world. That's a part of helping bring things back to the way they're supposed to be.
Yes. Yeah. I think that it's helpful to reframe the question of not just like, okay, how can I bring justice? Because for me, that question feels really overwhelming of like, oh, I don't know how I can bring justice. But if I frame it as like, how can I bring things back into the way God designed them to be, that feels a lot more doable. And I think that there's lots of things we can do that just kind of like what we said in the Sermon on the Mount series, that just push back against decay and bring things back into order, back into how God designed them to be. And a couple of things I thought of that are really things we can do that put things back into God's design is anytime someone adopts or fosters a child, like that makes it like how God designed it to be. Anytime you care for a widow or feed the hungry at the Cleveland Emergency Shelter, like you're taking steps towards making things how they're supposed to be. And anytime you have a healthy relationship, like when you fight for your marriage, you're making it how it's designed to be. And another one I thought of, and I'm about to take this in a really intense turn, but I was recently listening to and reminded of like the injustice of the porn industry and how like the devil's like number one lie with that is to make people believe that it's like harmless and no one is being affected, no one's being hurt, it's not doing anything, it's not a big deal, it's harmless. But that could not be more untrue. Like that whole industry is such an injustice. Like there's so much human trafficking, so much abuse, so much coercion, so much evil,
objectification.
Yes, the whole thing is like the complete opposite of God's design for human flourishing, sexuality, just like dignity. It's so unjust. And so anytime someone gives into that, anytime someone keeps scrolling or clicks on that site, like whatever it is, you're like perpetuating such injustice in that industry. And so anytime the opposite is true as well, anytime we like fight our flesh, and anytime we don't give into that, and anytime we fight against that industry, we are helping bring things back into God's design and good order.
And I would just add, maybe the other side of that is just those who find themselves drawn toward it and have a hard time fighting against that pull, that desire. You know, there's a lot of studies that would say this is an addiction, and because of the way our brains get rewired, and that's not the way it's supposed to be either. And we need to have compassion for those who are struggling there. We need to come alongside them. We need to pray for them. We need to encourage them. We need to cheer for them. We need to hold them accountable, because that's not the way it's supposed to be either. And what they're experiencing is such a diminishment. It's such a small thing. Like it's so unsatisfying. It's so not what the Lord has for you, right?
Yeah, so, there's such a better way.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, that's really good. The verse in that same chapter, which chapter was on justice? Is that 42? Isaiah 42?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the verses in Isaiah 42 says, he will not grow faint. It's talking about the servant, which is we know to be Jesus. He will not grow faint or be discouraged until he has established justice in the earth. And reading that verse was just such an encouragement to me about how revolutionary Jesus is and how different he is from me. Is like when I think about like, oh my gosh, like human trafficking, oh my gosh, like all the orphans, all the hungry, all the like injustices injustices in the world, it can be make me so weary and so discouraged.
Yeah.
But then look at Jesus. He will not be discouraged until he has established justice in the earth. And so
Yes.
he's so different, and it's so good that he is who he is, because we're not like that.
That's right.
And so I was just encouraged to just look at Jesus and his like strength in bringing justice.
The zeal of the Lord will do this.
Yes. Yeah, that's good. All right, let's look at the next one. The next one was how this king is a light to the nations. And there was that verse about how it's no small thing. Or you help me.
It's too light a thing.
Too light a thing, yes.
Yes, that you would just go and bring Jacob back.
Yes.
You would just go and bring them back from captivity. I'm going to make you a light to the nations, to the entire world.
Yes, yeah. And then so that is our call as well, to like Jesus, be a light to the nations. And so you kind of encouraged us and challenged us that our church family does a very good job at taking care of one another, and that's something that we try to celebrate often, because it's really special, and it's really God's grace on our church that we do take such good care of one another. And we've like the whole being family thing, I feel like we've nailed it. Like, we are good at that.
Yeah, I think we are doing. I think we can always grow in that.
Yes.
But we are doing a great job with that.
Yes, and that's super encouraging. And we want to also be encouraged to not settle for just that. That's too small a thing.
Yes.
The Lord has more for us. We are to be a light for the nation. So when you imagine that, and you imagine our church really taking hold of that vision and mission to be a light to the nations, what are some of the ways that could look?
Well, that could look like going to another nation and having a real heart and desire to go and share the gospel with people who may have never heard the gospel before, or haven't experienced the nearness of Jesus like you've experienced. And so to go and be the hands and feet of Jesus in another place, sign up for a mission trip. When we talk about going, you say, I'll go. We had a few people in a very last minute kind of trip this fall say, I'll go. And I was so encouraged by that, because it was like so last minute. And then we ended up not being able to go just because of all that we have walked through this fall. But hey, when we announce something, sign up and go.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be like just go to another country, right? I mean, it's like because we talked about this in the sermon. The nations is another way to say the Gentiles, which is another way to say those who don't know the Lord, do not know God. They are far from Him. And those people live next door to you. Those people work across the hall from you. Those people sit in the stands with you as you watch your children compete. Those people don't have the type of caring family that we have. They might think they do, but they don't. They might sit at home and they're lonely because they wonder who really cares. And they don't know the comfort and joy that comes from knowing Christ, and we do.
Yes, yeah. I think another way to think of Gentiles or the nations is like people who rub you the wrong way, because in that time the Gentiles you kind of described them as like, it was the people that were viewed as like unclean and dirty and outsiders and probably just like an annoyance.
Yes.
It's the Doug too. It's the like that's strange, that's different, that's like messy. I don't want to be bothered with that. And so I think my prayer is that our church family would pursue those people, not because our default fleshly tendency is to like avoid people like that. When we see a mess, when we see different than us, when we see someone that is unclean in our eyes, our default is to withdraw and to avoid. But in the heart of Christ, He is drawn to people like that, and He pursues them, and that's the very person He came to save. And so what if we had that heart of Christ that is almost drawn to those people instead of seeking to avoid them?
Yeah. And I'll just add a thought here. Like, Jesus was called the light to the nations, right? The light to the world. That's actually how God called His people to be in the Old Testament, to be a light to the nations. They were to show and reflect how beautiful it is to follow God's word to be in a covenant with the one true God and to see how beautiful that is. That's what they were to do, like to shine, reflect, display that. Okay, we think like here's the thing: we think that God has called us. Sometimes we might think that God has called us to be a hammer to the nations, or a wrench to the nations, something that fixes the nations, something that fixes your neighbor, something that fixes the person who rubs you the wrong way, who believes, who does not believe in your God. Like, you're not called to fix them. You're called to display the light of the gospel to them, right? You're called to display to them how beautiful it is to trust in someone who sees you in your brokenness and your weaknesses and has come to rescue you.
Yes.
Like, just display the beauty of that, display the joy of that. I'm going to talk
Yes.
more about that this coming Sunday, but yeah.
And that would be so much more compelling to someone. Like, if I feel like people can sniff out when you're trying to fix them or when you're viewing them as a project.
Yeah.
But if you're just, like you're saying, just displaying the beauty of a life lived in submission to Jesus, that's interesting. That's compelling. I want to know more about that. But if I can sense that you're trying to fix me, or you think you like can save the day, then that's not pleasant.
And that's a good point. And the point I'm trying to make along with that is, if we think we're supposed to fix something or someone, and then we see it as a really big problem that we don't know how to fix, we move on.
Yes.
So
yeah.
It's not about fixing.
Yes.
It's about
that's good.
displaying.
Yeah, there's so much relief in knowing it's not on our shoulders to fix it.
Yes.
It's like we are faithful, we display, we are light, and we trust him to save and trust him to fix. And there's a relief there. All right, let's look at the next one, obedience. So we looked at how this king submits and this king obeys, and he has set his face like flint, and he is determined to obey. And we talked about how in his obedience, he didn't lose any of his kingship. And
That's
I think there's something in all of us that kind of fears complete submission, complete obedience, because we fear what we may have to lose, or we fear that we may be put to shame in some way.
Yep.
And so I love how in these verses it says, and he was not put to shame,
That's
but
right.
that is exactly what gets exalted in God's kingdom. So you talked about how in all of us, there's kind of this like fleshly thing that rises up that's just like, you're not the boss of me. And that's in me big time. I was like this natural rebel. But what are some other ways that you see kind of this pushback towards obedience in our hearts?
Well, I mentioned the insurance company that's tracking everything I do on while I'm driving. They're tracking my acceleration, my braking, and most importantly, my phone usage, because it's an app and it can know it. You have to give it all permit. You have to submit your phone and all of it to them. Okay, so it knows when you're messing around on your phone. Yeah, and so you know what? That's super obnoxious, right? That it would be watching to see if I'm actually following the law, right? Like there's something in me that feels violated by that, right? Like no one should be watching to see whether I follow the law or not. And then I've got a justification for all the reasons why I touched my phone or did whatever the thing was.
Very important.
It was, I'm sure, the guy on the phone, the guy from the insurance company that was on the phone with me yesterday, he was like, you can do everything hands-free on an iPhone. He's like, there's nothing you can't do with your voice, basically. So, you just got to figure it out. You just got to learn how to do it. So anyway, that's just one example. Like we don't like accountability, really. Yeah. That's just not something we like.
I think in all of us, or the kind of where I see it often in myself, is like the Lord has put people like my husband or my kids or close friends or people in my life group, and like they should have total permission to push back on me, even if it's like it may be the serious sit down one-on-one coffee conversation where they're like lovingly and gently and thoroughly calling out something in me, but it could also be the like quick comment or the just like almost joke of pointing something out in me, and my tendency is to like be like, no, you're not the boss of me. You're like, I got this, And I think that that's in all of us. But what if we had very soft hearts that were like opened to hearing and receiving anything like that, instead of our immediate like jerk reaction being, you're not the boss of me. And I feel like I see that a lot. It's just like anytime someone's like, hey, like maybe that is an unhealthy use of alcohol. What is everyone's response? No, I'm fine. I can handle it. You know, maybe that you spend too much time on your phone. No, I'm fine. Like, this is important. I've got it under control. Or maybe you shouldn't talk about your spouse like that. Or maybe like that joke was too far. Like any of those like kind of suggestions. I feel like so often we see the immediate pushback is like, you're not the boss of me.
Yeah, you're not the boss of me. And who are you, right? Like you've never, said something, inappropriate. Come on, right?
Yes, exactly.
As soon as we go there, it's like it's over. Like we're unteachable. We're incorrectable. Our pride's gonna keep us from growing.
Yes, yeah. But what if we, had ears to hear anything that someone suggested to us or called out in us? And what if we were determined to obey fully and have self-control in all of those areas and fight for that?
Yeah, and I don't want to pretend here like that's easy, okay? Like that's not easy for me. I don't like anybody confronting me, correcting me. There are people who are probably listening to this who have tried to confront me, and they know exactly what I'm talking about. Like I don't do that well, and which is why we need the Spirit of the one who came and did it well for us, right? So his Spirit, the Spirit of Christ, the servant king, is inside of you through faith in him, and he will strengthen you as we submit to him, and he'll give us what we need to be able to receive that correction and to be obedient even in the face of whatever.
Yes, yeah. And I think meditating on and looking at this song of this king who obeyed fully and who submitted fully and had that level of a soft heart and humility and receptiveness, like look at him, meditate on him, let that song of who he is stir in you. And that in and of itself is what kind of softens our hearts and makes us more like him.
Yes.
So if you're listening, I just encourage you to, when this podcast ends, take a few minutes to just meditate on and listen to these servant songs almost in your heart. Look at the way he brings justice. He brings things back to their original design. Look at the way he comes for not just his own. He doesn't just come for those who are winning and those who are doing good. He comes for the ugly and the unclean and the messy. And then look at the way he obeyed. Look at his full submission and how he was obedient even to the point of death. And then look at the way this king suffered for you, and look at how he brings sinners into his fold.
Yeah, that's good. That's a great way to end it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for listening, and thank you for listening all year. This is the last podcast of the year. We'll be back in January, so we appreciate all of you who listen faithfully and are so encouraging to us about that.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.